You're driving home in the rain. There's a deep puddle sitting right by the curb. A woman stands at the bus stop, coat pulled tight, waiting. You don't slow down. You barely notice. And that one splash could cost you £5,000. Most drivers in this country have no idea that's true. I didn't. I drove for over 40 years without knowing it. There is a rule sitting quietly in the highway code, older than most of us, and breaking it can drain your bank account and put points on your license. It was written down long ago. It was simply never explained to you. By the end of this, I'll show you the strangest one of all. A rule that came from the Netherlands in the 1960s, added to our own highway code as recently as 2022, hidden in Rule 239. It costs nothing to follow. You can start doing it the very next time you park. And police forces are treating it seriously in 2026. I still remember sitting in my instructor's little red Metro back in the day, him tapping the dashboard, telling me to just pass the test and I'd learn the rest on the road. I believed him. That was the mistake, because the road never taught me the things that could actually cost me. So let me tell you what I found when I finally sat down and read the whole thing, cover to cover, like a suspicious old man who no longer trusts being told, "You'll be fine." Let me start with that puddle, because it stunned me more than anything. I always thought splashing someone was rude, bad manners, the sort of thing you'd tut about. I never once imagined it was against the law, but it is. It sits under something called careless and inconsiderate driving, written into the Road Traffic Act of 1988, Section 3, and the Highway Code spells it out plainly in Rule 144, which tells you that you must not drive without reasonable consideration for other road users. Now here's the part that made me sit up. Soaking a pedestrian on purpose, or even through pure carelessness, counts. It genuinely counts. And the penalty is not a slap on the wrist. A standard fixed penalty starts around £100 and 3 points on your license. But if the police decide to take it to court, and they can, the fine can climb all the way to £5,000. £5,000 for a splash. When I first read that, I laughed. I thought it was one of those internet stories people pass around. So I did what I always do now. I checked it properly. I went to the actual wording of the act. I read the Crown prosecution guidance. And there it was, plain as day. There have been real cases, drivers actually taken to court for deliberately drenching people walking home. The law has teeth, and it has had them for decades. Here's what nobody tells you. The word that matters most in that law is consideration. The moment you saw that woman at the bus stop and had the chance to slow down and chose not to, you crossed a line the law recognizes. It isn't about whether you meant to be cruel. It's about whether a careful, considerate driver would have eased off. That's the test. So I started testing myself. Every wet drive, I'd catch that puddle coming, glance at the pavement, and lift off the accelerator a touch. Cost me nothing. A second of my time. And I realized something uncomfortable. In all those years, I'd probably soaked a dozen strangers without a second thought. Any one of them, on a bad day, near a camera, could have made me very sorry. But that raised a bigger question in my mind, and it's the one that started to make me angry. If a rule this simple, this old, and this expensive was sitting there the whole time, why had nobody ever told me? That's where the story stops being about puddles and starts being about something a lot less innocent. Because I began to notice a pattern. The driving test I sat all those years ago covered the basics. Stopping distances, roundabouts, mirror, signal, maneuver. And then you passed, and that was it. Nobody ever posted you an update. Nobody sat you down 5, 10, 20 years later and said, "By the way, the rules have changed, and here's what could catch you out now." The highway code is updated regularly, quietly. Rules get added. Wording gets sharpened, new offenses appear, and the vast majority of people driving on our roads today learned their version of the code years ago and never looked at it again. I certainly hadn't. Mine was gathering dust in a drawer, a thin little booklet I hadn't opened since before some of these rules even existed. Now think about who benefits from that gap between what you learned and what the law actually says today. Councils, for a start. Fixed penalty notices are a genuine source of income for local authorities. Every fine for something a driver didn't even know was an offense is money straight into the pot. Insurance companies benefit too, because points on your license push your premiums up, sometimes for years. And the camera firms, the technology suppliers, the enforcement contractors, they all do very nicely when ordinary people keep breaking rules they were never properly taught. I'm not saying anyone sat in a room and plotted to keep you ignorant. I'm saying the ignorance is profitable, and nobody in the chain has any reason to fix it. A confused driver is a paying driver. It really is that simple. And in 2026, the tools they have to catch you are nothing like the ones from my day. We're not talking about a Bobby standing on a corner anymore. We're talking about cameras that use artificial intelligence to spot behavior automatically. Cameras that can tell if you're not wearing a seatbelt. Cameras that can see a phone in your hand. Cameras that log a number plate and flag a driver in seconds. The enforcement has quietly become far cleverer than the public understands, while the public's knowledge of the rules has stayed frozen decades in the past. That's the trap. Old knowledge in your head, new enforcement on the road, and the gap between the two comes straight out of your pocket. Which brings me to the one that actually changed my daily habits, because I was doing it every single morning without a clue. Idling, sitting in a parked car with the engine running. I used to do it all the time. Warming the car on a cold morning, sitting outside the school gates waiting for the grandkids, parked up outside a shop while my wife nipped in, engine humming away to keep the heater going. It felt like nothing. It felt like my right. It's my car, my fuel, my business. Except it isn't just my business, and it hasn't been for a long time. Rule 123 of the Highway Code deals with this directly. It tells you that you must not leave a vehicle's engine running unnecessarily while it is stationary on a public road. And the muscle behind that rule comes from regulations passed back in 2002, which gave councils the legal power to issue fixed penalties for engine idling. That's over 20 years this has been enforceable. 20 years I was breaking it and never knew. And that raises a question worth stopping on for a moment. Because idling isn't just about a fine on a public road, it's about what that running engine is really doing to your wallet. Picture yourself on that cold morning, sitting in the driveway, engine humming, burning fuel to go precisely nowhere. And now picture doing that same thing to the engine itself for years, feeding it the wrong oil, ignoring the small checks, until one day a bill lands that dwarfs any fine. That running engine of yours is worth far more than they're telling you, and that's exactly what the Complete Engine Intelligence Library was built to protect. It arrives as an instant download straight to your email, and inside it you get the oil protocol that outdoes any pricey additive, cooling system checks that catch the failure nobody sees coming, the old warm-up routine mechanics knew before the manuals got thin, and the trick to prevent timing chain collapse for almost nothing. It puts you back in control before the next repair quote hits. Here's a check you can run for free tonight, in your own driveway. Pop the bonnet, pull the dipstick, and really look at the oil. Its color, how thin or gritty it feels between your fingers. That one habit, done right, is the difference between an engine that quits early and one that pushes past 200,000 miles. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And this matters no matter when you're watching, because the next repair quote is coming for every one of us. The only question is whether you meet it knowing the real cost or the tripled one. Now hold that thought, because before I get to that strangest rule from the Netherlands, I've got to come back to the lane that catches out the most careful drivers of all. The fine starts small, around 20 pounds if you turn the engine off when you're asked. But refuse. Sit there stubborn, and it doubles to 40 pounds, and some areas are pushing to raise those figures higher. And here's what changed the game. More and more councils in 2026 are actively running idling enforcement, sending officers to hotspots outside schools, stations, and shopping streets, precisely because it's easy money and it's backed by air quality concerns the public generally supports. Now, when I first read Rule 123, my reaction was the same as yours probably is right now. 20 pounds? Who cares? That's a small price. But that's the thinking they count on, and it's the wrong way to look at it, because the fine was never the real cost. Here's what I actually measured. I got curious, so I paid attention for a fortnight. I added up roughly how long my engine sat running while going nowhere. Warming up, waiting, parked with the heater on. It came to a startling amount of dead time every week, all of it burning fuel to move the car precisely 0 distance. A modern engine idling gets you nothing. No miles, no progress, just fuel turning into fumes and pound coins turning into nothing at all. Independent motoring research has shown for years that idling for more than around a minute burns more fuel than simply switching off and restarting. The old belief that starting the engine uses loads of petrol comes from cars built decades ago, with carburetors, from an era that's long gone. On anything modern, it's a myth. A myth that's been quietly costing you money at the curb and at the pump. So I stopped. Cold morning, I don't sit there warming it, I just drive off gently and let it warm as it goes, which is actually better for the engine anyway. Waiting outside somewhere, I turn the key off. Simple. And over a year, between the fuel I stopped wasting and the fine I'll never get, that little habit is worth real money. Not pennies, real money. But this is where I need to stop and talk to a particular person watching right now. Maybe you're sitting there thinking this is all very well for people with newer cars and money to spare, that you can't afford new gadgets or special kit or a solicitor to fight fines, that these rules are just another way to squeeze people who are already stretched thin. If that's you, then the next part is for you especially, because everything I'm about to tell you is completely free, and you can start this week with the car already sitting on your drive. You don't need to spend a penny to protect yourself. You need to know 3 things, and you need to change 3 habits. That's it. First habit, read the actual highway code, not the old copy in your drawer. The current one is available to read for nothing at all online, and if you don't use a computer, your local library will have the latest printed edition, and a copy costs only a couple of pounds if you'd rather own one. I sat down one evening with a cup of tea and read the whole thing over a few nights. It was genuinely eye-opening. I found half a dozen rules I'd been quietly breaking for years. Free knowledge, the single best protection you can give yourself, and it costs nothing but an hour or 2 of your time. Second habit, the engine goes off when you're not moving. Waiting to collect someone, parked outside a shop, stuck for more than a minute, key off. It saves fuel, it protects you from the idling fine, and it's the easiest change in the world. You already know how to turn your own key. Third habit, and this is the one people forget entirely. Keep left unless you're overtaking. I'll come back to why in a moment, but hanging in the middle lane of a motorway, cruising along with empty lanes to your left, is an actual offense. Moving over costs you nothing. It just takes remembering. None of that needs money. None of it needs new technology. None of it needs anyone's permission. It needs the willingness to learn the rules that were written for you but never handed to you. And I promise you, the person who reads the code is far harder to find than the person who assumes they already know it. Now let me come back to that middle lane, because it's a perfect example of how these rules sneak up on decent, careful drivers. Middle lane hogging. Sitting in the center lane of a 3-lane motorway, not overtaking anyone, just parked there at a steady speed while the inside lane sits empty beside you. Most people who do it think they're being safe, staying out of the way, keeping clear of the slow lane and the fast lane both. They think they're the sensible ones. Rule 264 of the Highway Code is clear. You should always drive in the left-hand lane when the road ahead is clear. The other lanes are for overtaking, and since 2013, hogging the middle lane has been treated as careless driving, with police able to hand out an on-the-spot fine of £100 and 3 points on your license. No court needed. I was guilty of this one for years. I genuinely believed the middle lane was the safe, sensible place to sit. Nobody ever corrected me. My instructor never mentioned it, because back when I learned, the enforcement didn't exist. But it exists now, and the reasoning behind it is sound. A middle lane hogger forces everyone else to bunch up and weave around them, turning a wide-open motorway into a bottleneck. It causes the very danger the hogger thinks they're avoiding. So I trained myself out of it. Overtake, then move back left. Overtake, move back left. It felt strange at first, all that lane changing, but within a week it was second nature, and I noticed the traffic around me flowed better for it. Cost me nothing. Saved me £100 and 3 points I'll never lose. And here's the thread running through every one of these. Splashing, idling, lane hogging. In each case, the rule is old, the enforcement is new, and the driver is the last to know. That gap is not an accident. It's the most reliable moneymaker on the road, and you are the one funding it every time you drive on habits you learned decades ago. But there's one more rule, the one I promised you at the start. And of everything I found in that book, this is the one that genuinely stopped me in my tracks. Because it's the one almost nobody in this country has ever heard of, and it comes with a story I never expected. Let me set it up with a scene, because you've lived it 100 times. You've parked at the curb. You're done. You're getting out. You reach across with your right hand, the hand nearest the door, grab the handle, and push it open. Quick. Automatic. You've done it that way your whole life. I certainly had. And that ordinary movement, that one you never think about, has a name in the courts. It's called car dooring. Opening your door into the path of a cyclist, a motorcyclist, or a pedestrian. It's one of the most common causes of serious injury to cyclists in our towns, and it is absolutely an offense. Under long-standing road traffic regulations, opening a vehicle door so as to cause injury or danger can land you a fine of up to £1,000, and if someone is badly hurt, it can be far, far worse than money. For most of the last century, we simply told people to look before opening the door. And people forgot, every single day, because looking with your near hand on the handle means barely turning your head, a quick glance in the mirror if you remember it at all, and then out you go. Now here's the part that feels like recovered treasure. Back in the 1960s, in the Netherlands, a country that lives and breathes cycling, they developed a simple technique to solve this exact problem. Not a gadget, not a law with a big fine, just a change in how you move your own body. They taught drivers to open the car door with the hand furthest from it. So if you're in the driver's seat here, that means reaching across and opening your door with your left hand instead of your right. Sounds like nothing, doesn't it? But try it, and something remarkable happens automatically. When you reach across your body with the far hand, your shoulders turn. Your head turns with them. Your eyes are pulled naturally back and out, over your shoulder, straight to the exact spot a cyclist would be coming from. You cannot help but look. The movement forces the safety check that willpower alone always fails to do. It became known around the world as the Dutch reach. And here is the detail that got me. This quiet little 60-year-old technique from the Netherlands was formally written into our own British Highway Code as recently as 2022, tucked into Rule 239, which now recommends that when you leave your vehicle, you open the door using your hand on the opposite side to the door, because it makes you turn your head to look over your shoulder. 60 years that method existed, kept alive in another country while we forgot it entirely, and it only reached our own rulebook a few years ago, which means almost every driver on the road today passed their test without ever hearing of it. It's in the code right now. It's the law's own recommendation. And I'd bet almost everyone watching this has never once been told. So of course I tested it. I felt daft the first few times, deliberately reaching across with the wrong hand like a man who'd forgotten how doors work. But by the fourth or fifth time, I understood. My body turned. My eyes went to the road behind me without me even deciding to look. I saw a cyclist coming that, with my old right-handed shove, I'd have swung the door straight into. That was the moment it stopped being a quaint foreign habit and became something I'll do for the rest of my life. It costs nothing. It needs no equipment. You can start the very next time you park the car. Today, this afternoon. It protects a stranger's life. It protects you from a fine of up to £1,000. And it protects you from the kind of guilt you never recover from. All from turning your body the other way. That's what I mean when I say this knowledge was buried. Not locked in a vault, just quietly left out of everything that was ever handed to you. The Dutch kept it alive by necessity. Someone finally wrote it into our code, and now it's sitting there waiting, and hardly anyone reaches for it. Now you have it. Now you're one of the few who does. Think about what all of this really tells you. The splashing rule from the Road Traffic Act of 1988. The idling rule backed by regulations from 2002. The middle lane offense enforced since 2013. The Dutch reach written into Rule 239 in 2022. 4 rules, 4 different decades. Every one of them real, every one of them enforceable, and every one of them a stranger to the ordinary driver who learned to drive once and was never taught again. The Highway Code itself, by the way, is older than most people realize. The very first edition was published back in 1931, and it cost the grand sum of 1 penny. 1 penny for the rules of the road. It was meant to be for everyone, cheap enough for any driver in the country to own and read. That was the whole spirit of it. Knowledge for all, so the roads would be safer for all. Somewhere along the way, we lost that spirit. We turned it into a booklet you cram before a test and forget for the rest of your life. And in that forgetting, we handed away the one thing that protects us. Not money, not a fancy car, just knowing the rules that were written in plain language for us. I went looking for old-fashioned thrift and self-reliance, the way earlier drivers just knew these things by habit, and what I found was that the knowledge was never lost. It was only left unclaimed, sitting in a book that costs a couple of pounds or nothing at all to read, while people around it paid fines, paid higher premiums, and paid at the pump for habits they never knew were costing them. So, here's what I'd ask you to carry away from all this. Not fear, not the worry that a camera's going to catch you tomorrow. Just the quiet satisfaction of being the person who actually knows, in a world of people who only assume they do. You just took back something that was quietly kept from you, and it didn't cost you a thing. You're the kind of person who doesn't like being caught out, who doesn't like paying for ignorance that was never your fault, who believes plain useful knowledge shouldn't be hidden behind a fine. That's exactly who this is for. Now I want to hear from you. Of these four, which one genuinely surprised you? Was it the 5,000-pound splash, or was it that little Dutch trick of opening the door with the wrong hand? Tell me in the comments, and tell me which one you're going to start doing first. And I'd love to know what part of the country you're driving in, because enforcement is not the same everywhere, and it helps everyone watching to know what's happening on their own roads. If you believe useful knowledge like this has been quietly buried so someone else can profit from your not knowing it, then come along with us, because that's exactly what we do here. We dig these things back up and hand them to the people they were always meant for. Next time, I'm going to show you a rule about your headlights that most drivers get completely wrong, one that could actually make you liable if there's a crash, even when you thought you were being polite. It's not what you think, and once you know it, you'll never flash your lights the same way again. Drive carefully out there, and reach across with the far hand. Before you go, let me tell you where this leads. Today I showed you one rule, but inside the Old Ways Society, I walk you through every hidden rule in the Highway Code. And if something puzzles you, ask me directly, and a real person, me, answers you, never a machine. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel any time. Now, there's something else you really ought to know. Some cars are quietly being turned away by garages across the country, and you might be driving one. Let me show you which ones right here.